وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وصحابته المنتجبين. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: ومنهم من عاهد الله لئن آتانا من فضله لنصدقن ولنكونن من الصالحين فلما آتاهم من فضله بخلوا به وتولوا وهم معرضون فأعقبهم نفاقا في قلوبهم إلى يوم يلقونه بما أخلفوا الله ما وعدوه وبما كانوا يكذبون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Tonight we will, inshallah, address the verse that I just recited from Surah At-Tawbah regarding stinginess and hypocrisy. Before we delve into the topic and we discuss the occasion of revelation, sabab al-nuzul, of why this verse was revealed, let's give a brief overview. Surah At-Tawbah talks about the mushrikeen, those who fought the early Muslims during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and hence Surah At-Tawbah begins by this: Bara'atun min Allahi wa Rasulihi. The verse immediately begins to talk about having a ceasefire, fighting, and a ceasefire with mushrikeen, the ceasefire during the 4 holy months. And then the general theme of Surah At-Tawbah is al-munafiqun, the hypocrites. This was a very important factor to be taken into consideration in the early history of Islam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of his major challenges, in addition to fighting the aggression of the mushrikeen of Mecca and the surrounding tribes, some were even Ahl Kitab, Jews and Christians, who fought Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina, who felt that his presence and the presence of his movement, the success of his movement, was seen as a threat to their interests in the region. In addition to this, in addition to the wars that they waged against Rasulullah and the Muslims of Medina, there was a greater threat to Islam and to the Muslim community in Medina, and this threat was from within, from inside Medina, from the hypocrites. They posed, if not an greater threat than the threat of the mushrikeen and Ahl Kitab and the kuffar who would attack Medina every once in a while and conspire. If their threat was not greater, at least it was equal. The threat of hypocrites was equal to the threat of mushrikeen and kuffar, because they are a domestic problem. They're a disease inside, like a cancer. Cancer can be more dangerous than when a person is injured. If a person is injured, this person can find a cure for himself, can be healed and treated. But cancer, which is a danger from within the body, is sometimes very difficult to heal and to cure, and it could lead to a person's death. So too were the hypocrites of Medina. They were like a cancerous tumor in the body of Muslims. Surah At-Tawbah talks about the munafiqeen. وَمَنْ حَوْلَكُمْ مِنَ الْأَعْرَابِ مُنَافِقُونَ وَمِمَّنْ حَوْلَكُمْ مِنَ الْأَعْرَابِ مُنَافِقُونَ لَا تَعْلَمُهُمْ نَحْنُ نَعْلَمُهُمْ. Some of those around you in Medina are hypocrites. What is a hypocrite? Who are the hypocrites? The hypocrites were a group that pretended to be Muslim while deep down inside they were kuffar. They were acting, they were pretending. They only pretended to be amongst the the Muslim community, while in reality they were conspiring against Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And one of the leaders of this movement was Abdullah ibn Ubay, or Ibn Abi Salul, as he's mentioned. He was the head of the hypocrites who pretended to be one of the followers of Rasulullah, while behind closed doors he was conspiring against the Muslim community of Medina. Now, we all know the danger of hypocrites, and we all know what they did. We all know the harms that were caused by the hypocrites. The problem of a hypocrite is that he pretends to be a friend, while a mushrik, the mushrikeen, they outright spoke against Rasulullah. They were enemies in public. They had nothing to hide. They were declared enemies. While the hypocrites, they pretended to be Muslim, they pretended to support Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, while deep down they were conspiring against him. They were working against him to bring down the Muslim community. Now, having said this, knowing the context behind Surah At-Tawbah, this historical context of the Muslim community in Medina and the challenges that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam faced in Medina, this verse that I just recited falls into the same category of hypocrisy. This verse gives us another story, another image of the hypocrites in Medina, of how some of the companions of Rasulullah were hypocritical. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ عَاهَدَ اللَّهَ لَإِنْ آتَانَا مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. And some of them, some of the hypocrites, وَمِنْهُمْ, and amongst them, the pronoun goes back to hypocrites. مَنْ عَاهَدَ اللَّهِ, they vowed to Allah, لَإِنْ آتَانَا مِنْ فَضْلِهِ, if He gives us from His bounties, from His blessings, لَنَصَّدَّقَنْ, we shall pay charity. If He gives us from His bounties, meaning if He makes us rich, if He gives us an abundance of money, لَنَصَّدَّقَنْ, we will give charity. وَلَنَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ, and we shall be لَنَكُونَنْ. Lam here, this is Lam al-Qasam. They're vowing, they're swearing. لَنَكُونَنْ, we vow to be amongst the righteous. لَنَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ, we vow to be amongst the righteous. فَلَمَّا آتَاهُمْ, when He gave them, Allah tells us the result of this vow. They asked Allah, they made a vow that if He gives us from His bounties, if He makes us rich, we will pay charity and we will become amongst the righteous. فَلَمَّا آتَاهُمْ, when He gave them مِنْ فَضْلِهِ, when He gave them from His bounties and His riches, بَخِلُوا بِهِ, they became stingy. They became stingy. وَتَوَلَّوْا, and they turned away. وَهُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ, they turned their backs. They ran away. They left. They forgot about their vow. They forgot about their promise. They forgot about their promise that they made with Allah. What was the result of this breaking of a promise? What was the result of this stinginess, of this greed, of this love of money and dunya? فَأَعْقَبَهُمْ نِفَاقًا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ, hypocrisy entered their hearts. They became hypocrites. This is hypocrisy. They promised, if Allah gives us money, we will give charity, we'll be righteous, we'll be good. They broke their promise. This shows that it was all hypocrisy. It was just a show. It was theatrics. It wasn't real. Now that Allah actually gave them from His bounties, from His riches, they ran away, they turned their faces, and they forgot all about Allah. This is hypocrisy. فَأَعْقَبَهُمْ نِفَاقًا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ إِلَى يَوْمِ يَلْقَوْنَهُ. The result was that they remained hypocritical, and hypocrisy remained in their hearts. You see, hypocrisy is a disease of the heart. It's not a physical illness. It's not having your arteries clogged. That's a physical illness. A spiritual illness of the heart is hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is in the heart. إِلَى يَوْمِ يَلْقَوْنَهُ. This hypocrisy remained with them until the day they meet Allah, يَوْمِ يَلْقَوْنَهُ, which is the day of judgment. Why? Why did hypocrisy remain in their hearts? بِمَا أَخْلَفُوا اللَّهَ مَا وَعَدُوهُ. Because they broke their promise to Allah. بِمَا أَخْلَفُوا اللَّهَ. They broke their promise to Allah. They were not true to Allah. They were not true to themselves, and they were not true to Allah. وَبِمَا كَانُوا يَكْذِبُونَ. And because they were lying. They knew they were lying. When they made that promise, they were not true to themselves. They were just saying this. Just saying this. So that Allah, they think they could fool Allah, and they can fool the messenger of Allah. This is the idea of this verse in Surah Al-Tawbah. It talks about stinginess and it talks about hypocrisy. Now the reason behind this revelation, there are several verses. There are several narrations. In Majma' al-Bayan by Al-Shaykh al-Tabrasi, he mentions the following. He says this verse was revealed regarding Tha'laba ibn Hatib. Tha'laba, one of the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. وَكَانَ مِنَ الْأَنصَارِ. He was from the people of Medina. He was not from the Muhajirin, from the migrants. فقال للنبي صلى الله عليه وآله ادعو الله أن يرزقني مالا. One day he told Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, pray that Allah grants me money. Money. I want cash. Pray that Allah grants me money. فقال, Rasulullah answered him, Ya Tha'laba. Look at the beauty of what Rasulullah told him. يا ثعلبة قليل تؤدي شكره خير من كثير لا تطيقه. Told him, Ya Tha'laba, having a little that you could thank Allah for is better than having a lot that you cannot thank Allah for. What powerful words. This is so powerful. Amazing words. Having little that suffices you, but you thank Allah for. تؤدي شكره. You may deliver justice to this amount that Allah has given you by thanking Allah. Thanking Allah for this amount. تؤدي شكره. This is so hard to interpret. We don't have the right words in English to interpret what تؤدي شكره. To thank for is not enough. تؤدي شكره means that Allah has given us something we can actually return back to Allah. In thanking Him, we can return back to Allah by giving to the poor, by thanking Him verbally, by thanking Him physically, by spending the money in the way He wants. تؤدي شكره. Because every gift that Allah has given requires thanks accordingly. Knowledge, for example, if Allah has given someone knowledge, that person has to thank Allah for his knowledge or her knowledge. How? How do you thank Allah for knowledge? By spreading knowledge. You see? We thank Allah accordingly, according to the gift. If it's money, we spread that money, we share the money. If it's food, we share the food. If it's knowledge, we share the knowledge. That's how we thank Allah. That's how we نؤدي شكره. We deliver the thanking. Do thanking. Justly thank Allah for that gift. If Allah has given someone wisdom, they thank Allah by sharing that wisdom. خير من كثير لا تطيق. Having little that you can do justice to by thanking Allah is better than having so much that you cannot. But Tha'laba, it wasn't going in his mind. أما لك في رسول الله أسوة حسنة. Ya Tha'laba, don't you have a good example in Rasulullah? Look at how I live. Look at my lifestyle. Am I a king? Do I live above the people? Do I have palaces and mansions and guards and armies? But Tha'laba, when you have the love of dunya in your heart, you don't think logically. You don't think with your brain. You don't think reasonably. وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ. Look at all these words of advice and admonishment. Look at how Rasulullah is preaching to him, and look at the effect that it had on him. وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ لَوْ أَرَدْتُ أَن تَسِيرَ الْجِبَالُ مَعِي ذهبا وفضة لسارت. If I wanted these mountains to turn into gold and silver for me, I could have turned them into gold and silver. Indeed, Rasulullah's dua is answered. If Rasulullah had asked Allah to turn all the mountains surrounding Medina into gold and silver, Allah would have done it for him. But why doesn't he? Because these things don't matter to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They could care less whether he has gold and silver or not. What is he going to do with it when they put him in his grave? Nothing, absolutely nothing. Except that they create an attachment for us to this dunya. The more wealth, the more money that we have, the more we become attached to dunya. أن تسير الجبال معي ذهبا وفضة لسارت. طيب, Tha'laba went. He saw that he can't convince Rasulullah. He came later. ثم أتاه بعد ذلك فقال يا رسول الله ادعو الله أن يرزقني مالا. Ya Rasulullah, pray that Allah gives me money. But he saw that that's not enough to convince Rasulullah, because that's what he told him last time, and Rasulullah didn't pray for him. So he made a vow. See? He made a وَالَّذِي بَعْثَكَ بِالْحَقِّ وَالَّذِي بَعْثَكَ بِالْحَقِّ. I swear by the one who set you rightfully. لَإِنْ رَزَقَنِي اللَّهُ مَالًا لَأُعْطِيَنَّ كُلَّ ذِي حَقٍّ حَقَّهُ. I swear by the one who set you rightfully that I will give people's dues. I will give people's rights. Meaning I will give to the poor. I will give my zakat. I will give my alms. I will give my charity. When he said this, Rasulullah said, okay, Allahumma rzuq Tha'laba malan. Oh Allah, grant Tha'laba money. Give him money. قال فاتخذ غنما. The hadith says Tha'laba gained a sheep. He found a sheep. Either someone gave it to him, he found it in the desert, he got a sheep. فنمت كما ينمو الدود. One sheep became two. How? Maybe he went to sell the sheep, and with its price, he bought two. The two became 3, 4. They kept on buying and selling, and the animals reproduced. فَنَمَتْ كَمَا يَنْمُ الدُّودُ. They started reproducing like worms, the hadith says. فَضَاقَتْ عَلَيْهِ الْمَدِينَةِ. Until he couldn't stay in the city, in Al-Madinah Al-Munawwara, because it's a small city. He had so much cattle, he had so much sheep, that he had to leave the city, live in the countryside, because of his cattle. فضاقت عليه المدينة فتنحى عنها فنزل واديا من أوديتها. So he left the city and he went to a nearby area. A nearby area in between the mountains. ثم كثرت نموا حتى تباع عن المدينة. Until he had so much cattle that he went to a farther area. He left the city of Medina. He left Rasulullah. He left Al-Masjid Al-Nabawi. People would die to come live in Medina, to see Rasulullah, to pray behind him, to see him every day in the mosque, to hear his words and his speeches. This man left the city. فاشتغل بذلك عن الجمعة والجماعة. He stopped attending the mosque. He stopped attending Salat al-Jumu'ah. He started attending Salat al-Jama'ah. He stopped praying behind Rasulullah. طيب, does it end there? No. وبعث رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله إليه المصدق ليأخذ الصدقة. Rasulullah sent him someone to take his charity. He has to pay charity He has to pay zakat. Zakat is wajib. فَأَبَى وَبَخِلَ. He refused. He said no. His stinginess kicked in. He refused to pay charity. He refused to give any of his wealth, any of his money, any of his cattle, any of his sheep, even though he had made a promise that if Allah gives me, I will give for the sake of Allah, I will give my dues, I will give my zakat and charity. وَقَالَ مَا هَذِهِ إِلَّا أُخْتُ الْجِزْيَةِ. He said, what is this? Is this jizya? Jizya was a tax upon non-Muslims. Of course, there were two kinds of taxes. Al-jizya was a tax that non-Muslims had to pay. Zakat was a tax that Muslims had to pay. So it was the same. It's not that non-Muslims were treated differently or they were humiliated. No. The same tax that non-Muslims had to pay jizya, Muslims had to pay zakat. He said, are you taking from me jizya? This is the sister of jizya, meaning, why are you treating me like a kuffar? He just wanted an excuse. He just simply wanted an excuse not to pay. فقال رسول الله يا ويح ثعلبة يا ويح ثعلبة. When they came and told Rasulullah said, woe unto Talib. Woe unto Talib. This is hypocrisy. This is the hypocrisy that the verse speaks about. After he had declared that if Allah gives him money, Rasulullah told him that thank Allah for what you have, because you will have something that you can't thank Allah for. Rasulullah was trying to tell him that you will lose your faith, your religion, your deen. But he didn't understand. He didn't comprehend. And in fact, this is what happened. Hypocrisy. Stinginess, my dear friends. Stinginess. Stinginess is one of the worst qualities in a human being. The love of money and not wanting to spend money. The phobia of spending money. Fear of spending money. That's what stinginess is. This is a quality that is highly frowned upon, highly condemned in Islam, in the Quran and the Hadith. Allah says, الَّذِينَ يَبْخَلُونَ وَيَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبُخْلِ وَيَكْتُمُونَ مَا آتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ وَاعْتَدْنَا لِلْكَافِرِينَ عَذَابٌ مُهِينًا. There are some people that are stingy, and there are some that order others to be stingy as well. Once I remember I was invited for iftar during the month of Ramadan several years ago. And I was sitting with a group. Some lady told me that, inshallah, I would like to come for Arba'een this year. I would like to come for Arba'een. And she would come for Arba'een, Ziyarat al-Arba'een to Karbala every year. We're having iftar. Someone told her, why go to Arba'een? Every year. Why waste your money on going for ziyarah, on going for Arba'een? Instead, spend this money on orphans. Give it to orphans. How much are you going to spend for Arba'een? $3,000? $4,000? Take this money and give it to orphans. I looked at him. I told him, do you come for Ziyarat al-Arba'een? He said, no. I said, do you have the money to come for Ziyarat al-Arba'een? He said, yes. I told him, when you don't come for Ziyarat al-Arba'een, what do you do with that money? Do you give it to orphans? He started scratching his head. No. He doesn't give it to orphans. So he's stingy. He doesn't give his money to orphans. He doesn't come for Ziyarat al-Arba'een, doesn't want to spend his money on ziyarah. Nor does he spend his money on orphans. And he's telling others not to come for Ziyarat al-Arba'een and not to spend their money. Because that's how stingy people are. They have a phobia of spending their money, and they tell others not to spend their money as well. This is stinginess. In another verse, Allah says, "Ha antum haula'i tud'auna litunfiqu fi sabilillah, faminkum man yabkhal." Some of you are invited to spend your money for the sake of Allah. However, فَمِنْكُمْ مَنْ يَبْخَلْ. Some of you are stingy. وَمَنْ يَبْخَلْ فَإِنَّمَا يَبْخَلُ عَنْ نَفْسِهِ Wallahu al-ghani wa antum al-fuqara. Allah says, if you're stingy, your stinginess goes back to you. Don't think we need your money. Don't think we need your money. Allah is the rich and you're the poor. You human beings, no matter how rich you become, you're still poor. Wallahu al-ghani. Allah is rich. He's not in need of our money. When we give for the sake of Allah, it comes back to us. It doesn't go into Allah's bank account. Allah doesn't benefit from our money. We benefit from the money that we give. وَمَا تُقَدِّمُوا مِنْ شَيْءٍ وَمَا تُقَدِّمُوا لِأَنفُسِكُمْ تَجِدُوهُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. When we give money, we're actually making an investment for ourselves in the akhirah. In our next life, we will see that we made an investment. Our money has returned to us. We have a house in the next life. It's furnished. We have gardens. We have a Jannah that we spent money on. Those who are stingy, they're being stingy on themselves. They don't want to spend on themselves, because if they did, they benefit. In the akhirah and in dunya, they benefit. The return comes back to them. It's like those who don't want to spend enough money on a nice house. When you buy a nice house, who benefits? You benefit. The more you spend money, the nicer the house is that you get to live in, not your neighbor, not regular people on the street. You get to benefit. So when you don't spend it, you are the number one loser. We have so many narrations on condemning the quality of stinginess. I will read to you just a few narrations. In a hadith by Imam Sadiq alayhi, in a hadith by Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, Al-bukhlu jami'un li masawi al-uyub. Stinginess is a quality that gathers many other qualities, many other bad qualities. Because someone who's stingy doesn't pay khums and doesn't pay zakat, doesn't pay charity, doesn't spend on his family. So his family is tired of him, doesn't spend on his wife, never has guests, never has dinner invitations. That means he doesn't have friends. A person who's stingy has all the bad qualities. You see him, he's miserable. His wife is upset, his children are upset, his friends are upset, his community members are upset. So that money goes to whom? Benefits whom? Hadith tell us that stingy people have weak faith in Allah Azza wa Jal. Because if a person has strong faith in Allah, knows that the same way they spend this money, money will come back to them. Money comes and goes. This money goes, but another will come. Give this for the sake of Allah. The one who sent you that money will send you more and more and more. When you fear for this money and you refuse to support your mosque, the Husseiniya, an orphanage, a clinic, a hospital, a satellite channel, any source, any good source, when you refuse, you're actually doubting Allah's generosity. You're doubting your faith in Allah. Because Allah says, I will give you. Spend whatever you spend for the sake of Allah, and I will return to you that money, and not just that same amount, but multiplied many times. But when you show stinginess, that means you're basically telling Allah that I don't believe you. I don't believe you. Al-bukhlu bil-mawjood, su'u al-dhanni bil-ma'bud. Imam Ali says that he who shows stinginess in what he has, he is actually doubting Allah's faith. He is doubting Allah. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, إن كان الخلف من الله حقا فالبخل لماذا? If Allah is giving you, then why show stinginess? Why be stingy? Rasulullah says, البخيل بعيد من الله بعيد من الناس قريب من النار. Stingy person is far from Allah. Allah does not love those who are stingy. And people don't love those who are stingy. Look at your community members. Who are the people that are loved the most? The ones that are generous. The ones whom their homes are always open. In Ramadan, they have iftar, they have suhoor, they always have guests. People are going in and out of their house all the time. They support their local mosque. They support charities. They support youth. They provide scholarships. You see them? They're the most loved members of the community. And look at these people who give, generous people. Do they go poor? Have you ever seen someone who's generous yet went poor, yet went broke because of his generosity? No. If he goes poor, maybe because of something else. Maybe for other reasons, but not because of his generosity. No one goes broke and poor because of their generosity. And it's sad because stingy people, they have love of money. They don't want to spend. Why? Because they fear poverty. But what they actually do is they live in poverty. They don't spend. They don't buy new clothing. They wear the same clothing, the same house, the same car. Nothing changes for them. Why? They don't want to spend because they fear poverty, but they actually live in poverty. So what they ran away from, they actually fell into. If you fear poverty, then live. Live your life. Make use of this money. Stingy people, they collect money for their heirs. That's all they do. They save their money for their heirs, for their children. They fear of spending. They increase their bank accounts. They make a collection. They tell them, spend your money. Spend your money on yourself, on your family, on your children, on your grandchildren. No. What happens is they die and their children get to benefit from that money. They only collected for others. This is what a stingy person does. I ask Allah Azza wa Jal to free us from such an illness, from such a spiritual illness, the illness of bukhl, stinginess, to grant us the quality of karam and generosity, and to take the love of money from our hearts, and to put the love of generosity in our hearts. إنه سميع مجيب. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
من الهدى